Russ, thanks so much for joining us. I'd like to start by just getting your thoughts on the last few weeks. Two well-respected cabinet ministers resigning over a lack of confidence in their prime minister.
Yes, well, I think when Jody Wilson-Raybould resigned, I think it was a shock to everybody, including me. Although, mind you, I wasn't too surprised because she'd been demoted. And also at the same time that she was demoted from Justice Minister to Veterans Affairs Minister, they moved Jane Philpott, a senior minister out of the Indigenous Services, into Treasury Board and put a junior minister in, Seamus O'Regan. So I thought those moves together were a bad sign for the Indigenous issues heading into the new election. Mm-hmm. And her testimony was quite riveting. I saw it. I certainly believe her. She's done a very good chronology of what she says happened. You know, naming about 11 people and going through about 10 instances where they put pressure on her as the Attorney General. So I think on the position she's taken as the Canadian Attorney General is definitely a principled position, and it's good. It certainly has created a problem for the Trudeau government. And now with Jane Philpott's resignation, the two ministers basically echoing each other in terms of their inability to sit at cabinet because they don't have confidence in the cabinet. And I presume the prime minister, since he heads the cabinet, it's a very big problem for this government. Even though they have 33 ministers that are seem to be sticking with the prime minister, I think it's pretty bad for them.
Tomorrow, Russ, Privy Council Clerk Michael Wernick will be testifying again at the Justice Committee. What is that? What is it about Wernick that Indigenous people should be paying attention to?
Well, you know, Indigenous peoples need to be aware that when political parties make promises during the election, like the Trudeau government did in 2015, about nation-to-nation relationships and a new reconciliation process and everything, they should be aware that those platforms are turned over to the bureaucracy to interpret and implement. And Michael Wernick, being the clerk of the Privy Council, is the top bureaucrat. And he was named by Trudeau in January 2016 as the clerk of the Privy Council, which means he's Prime Minister's deputy minister. And he's the one that's the gatekeeper to the cabinet from all the government departments. And he came from Indian Affairs. He was Harper's deputy minister of Indian Affairs for 8 years. So all of the things we saw under the Harper government, the caps, the cuts, you know, the spying on Cindy Blackstock for making a human rights complaint, the spying on communities for hotspots, that was all him that organized all of that. So now as clerk of the Privy Council, he can do a government-wide approach to Indigenous issues, and that's what he's been doing. In fact, in his testimony 2 weeks ago, he confirmed that he's the one that's been behind this Indigenous rights recognition framework. He says because the Prime Minister was busy with the NAFTA negotiations. But I've long suspected that he was propping up Minister Carolyn Bennett, and he pretty much confirmed that in his testimony.
Yeah, so that was some interesting testimony there related to the framework last week. Russ,
he also came out in very strong defense of her, complaining about how she's been treated on social media. So that again shows me that he's the one that's propping her up in this framework that she's still promoting.
Russ, we're running short on time, but I just want to get your thoughts. You know, the Indigenous peoples came out in support of the Liberals quite a bit in the last federal election. Where do you see this going for the Liberals in this fall's coming election?
I think a lot are going to stay home or vote for the NDP or the Greens. I can't see many voting for the Conservatives. But I think a lot are turned off by the Trudeau government, from what I've heard anyway and seen. I think a lot of First Nations peoples, Indigenous peoples are really concerned about the treatment of Jody Wilson-Raybould and even Philpott. She had gained a lot of trust from a lot of leaders, and there's now a lot of concern about the two of them resigning as to who's going to be speaking for Indigenous issues in the cabinet now.
Well, tomorrow should be interesting, and so should the election. Russ, appreciate you taking some time for us here.
Thank you.